so fun, John.
It's too creamy. It's really, really
But there's
creamy.
something else in there too. I think it's ultimate grilled cheese. So I've used 2 or 3 different kinds of cheese.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome back. Nice to be with you here at the Cottonwood Room at the Laramie County Library. Of course, we want to thank the library itself for hosting these events. We want to thank our business partners who help make all of our classic conversation possible and all of our educational opportunities. We want to thank you all for being here and being great supporters of the arts in our community. I'm joined today by a wonderful composer and electric guitar soloist, DJ Spar. Please welcome DJ. I told DJ that lately I've found it really been nice to not wait until the end of this, near the end of this hour to bring guest artists up, but have them here the whole time to even talk about the other pieces on the program that they're not performing on. And not only that, but also, as you can see, it might take DJ a few moments to get ready. So I'm glad we're not like waiting until starting to get set up here at like 12:40 or something. So welcome. We have a wonderful program that ties into President's Day weekend with Copeland's Lincoln Portrait. It also celebrates Black History Month with music by Florence Price and William Grant Still. And for some of you who are still in Valentine's mode, I see a lot of red out there. There's even some romantic music on this program. So I think we have something for everybody on this one. But it's also so exciting that this is a first, I believe, for the Cheyenne Symphony Orchestra, that our guest artist on a subscription concert will be an electric guitar. And so excited to do that. The world of classical music is changing, and it is a dynamic, fluid world, even though it may seem that it's stuck in its past. But orchestras everywhere are embracing newer music, new ideas, crossover, different kinds of approaches to what makes good music. It's not just the one thing, is it? It's not just Beethoven, Mozart, Tchaikovsky. I mean, after all, at one point, those composers were considered rebels, right? We sometimes forget. So this concert's actually going to start with music by Samuel Barber. Samuel Barber, who's so well known for his adagio for strings, was really one of our great opera and song composers of American composers. He wrote 2 very important operas, and before he wrote those operas, before he wrote Adagio for Strings, which was already an early piece, he wrote this overture to the School for Scandal. This was written when he was just 21 years old. Now the title needs a little explanation, because nowadays people aren't familiar, but there is an English play, The School for Scandal, by Sheridan. And I highly encourage you to take an hour and a half and go on YouTube and watch the play. It's actually quite hilarious. It's an older English play, of course, and it's very much of the situation comedy of the day, with a lot of hijinks and misidentities and love interest and all sorts of things like that. So I guess already with a fascination for literature and which stayed throughout his life, Samuel Barber's life, he, as a young 21-year-old, wrote this overture, in a way almost like the way Mendelssohn at age 17 wrote the overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream. So inspired by the play, but not exactly necessarily depicting the plot of the play, but maybe something of the mood of it, and perhaps even a character or two. He created this wonderful overture for orchestra. It's got a lot of things in it that are kind of sneaky and playful and like you might expect from a comedy at that time. I don't want to prevent you from jumping in at any moment.
Well, I'm having memories of being that age, and it's hard to write these things that young, right? But I believe Sam Barber enrolled early at Curtis Institute Music as maybe what would be a high school age student now. Probably didn't have to take the SATs. And then when I was a young composer in high school, I liked Sam Barber's School for Scandal. He has these great essays, first and second essays, and his symphony is amazing. So these are things I studied at the same time as playing rock music and bands.
Oh, that's so great. So yeah, it's really hard to imagine that this piece was written by a 21-year-old because it's It sounds like the music of a mature composer who's already found his voice and his style. There's so much in it that reminds me of some of his later pieces. There's a section that sounds a lot like the third movement of his famous violin concerto. There's a beautiful second theme that just sounds like one of the most beautiful melodies ever written by an American composer. So here's a little bit of this. See if we haven't tested out the technology here. I will mention something about the very beginning. The woodwinds play a chord, and the strings support that chord with some pizzicato plucking. But the trumpets, so the woodwinds have this D major chord, but then the trumpets are playing this E flat minor chord with it. And so you have right from the very beginning the sense that there's some like harsh dissonance thing, and like something's wrong. But it's playful. It is playful. Here it is. All right. Anytime. I think it's playing. Okay. How about this? 1 second. We'll took this to be
What were the chords
plan
again?
B. Watch this. We're gonna do it like this.
Maybe.
Oh, my volume was down. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to get through the speakers for a second.
I have a joke, it's the older you get, the less you can work technology in front of others.
So true.
Don't, not for Saturday night, not for me.
All right, now it should be fun. But not so. Okay. Well, we'll figure it out.
What were the two chords?
D major.
There it is.
Oh, there you go, okay.
It's going.
There it is. So you can hear that distance I was talking about one more time. Here's that opening. Okay. Why is it start so soft?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to jump ahead to that beautiful melody with something. Okay, so before that. Sorry. That's it. Okay. The oboe introduces a beautiful melody. Gorgeous. As you can smell, right from there, you have clear evidence of a composer who's kind of firmly rooted in that neo-romantic tradition and enjoying the singing line. You can see that how Samuel Barber would be a great, like, writing for the voice would be great, his operas and songs. And also, even in some of his later pieces, he gives the oboe big roles, like in his slow movement of his violin concerto. So we'll start with the School for Scandal overture. Anything else about Samuel Barber?
Well, I think we can see the origins of great American film scores as well. And if you think about Thomas Newman that scored like Shawshank Redemption and things like that, I think there's probably reason to say Barber.
Absolutely. It made a big influence. And of course, his Adagio for strings obviously used in film as well. But that's a great point. I think that in some ways people don't recognize, like the lay person on the street might know more of Copeland than Barber and not realize how important Barber was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very important. And then there's a lot of elements of coming out of Strauss and the German influences. You know, New York City's closer to Berlin than China. And in California, they had more Asian influence. Kind of
Yeah, that's a good point.
Further away from Berlin, the better for me.
Well, and then after that, we're going to perform William Grant Still's Serenade. And you may recall that William Grant Still was called the Dean of African American Composers. In a way, that's kind of a double-edged kind of compliment, because really he should be considered one of our great American composers. Not just the Dean of African American composers, but of all American composers. He had an incredible career spanning most of the 20th century, and he wrote 9 operas, 5 symphonies, 4 ballets, a number of pieces for television and film, and he was just a master. And this piece that we're performing is his Serenade. It's from 1957, so at the time he was about, I think, 62 years old when he wrote it. And actually he wrote it for a high school orchestra in Montana. I know. And so it doesn't make a lot of heavy demands on the musicians. By the way, the Samuel Barber piece is fiendishly difficult, which is interesting because he wrote it at age 21, and he wrote it for the Curtis Orchestra.
Hanging out of Curtis.
Yeah, it's different than Billings, or whatever high school orchestra. So, but this Serenade is just such a gorgeous piece. When I first heard it, I just sort of fell in love with it. And it features the cellos open with a beautiful melody supported by harp. In a way, it has actually it was Jeff Hickman who was saying that when he heard it, he heard the hints of Brahms' lullaby because of the interval of the main melody. Here's a little bit of what it sounds like. Let's try it different. So in addition to the strings and harp, there's just one flute and one clarinet. There are some hints of his use of blues and jazz, which just, runs throughout his music. You might recall when we performed his Afro-American Symphony about a year ago, that had a lot of blues. And there's that chord that you just heard, is one example, where you have these sort of blues chords that come in just for expressive reasons. Sometimes the pieces right next to each other have to kind of speak to each other or complement each other. In this case, it's really a nice contrast to Samuel Barber, which, although very melodic, the Barber piece is also kind of like fast and furious at times. And this one has this beautiful sense of just gorgeous melody without any hurry, just singing, the pure joy of singing and expression. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm going to call on that for the second movement of the Michael Dougherty, which has similar chord voicings and a similar string orchestration, and I'm allowed to play singing melodic content over it. And I also wanted to point out that it's a historical thing in classical music to be raising awareness for composer, and we don't know who William Grant Still is, but like Mendelssohn himself was the person I think that took the Beethoven symphonies and made them something that we all go to see all the time, and John Bach, and like all that stuff. So this world that Beethoven and Tchaikovsky have made for us, where we can all go enjoy these big classics, has these other rooms you can go to, and that's where these spots are. So it's great to see this kind of program.
After the Grant Still piece, we're going to perform Dances in the Cane Breaks by Florence Price. We've performed a number of her pieces as well. And it's exciting that her music is getting performed more and more all over the world. And partly that's just not just due to the fact that it's great music, but some of the music was previously unknown. Actually, it's an interesting story that there was this couple who was renovating a house outside of Chicago. I think this town was St. Anne, Illinois. And this was back in, I think, 2009 or 2013, right around then. And in the base, the house was really dilapidated. Part of a tree had fallen into the roof, and it had been vacant for a long time. This young couple bought it to renovate it. In the basement, they found this huge stack of music and the name Florence Price on every piece of paper. So they weren't musicians, they didn't know anything about it. But these were all of her manuscripts. This was her home outside of Chicago, where she wasn't as successful in her lifetime. And unfortunately, all this incredible treasure trove of her music was only discovered many, decades after her death in this situation. So those pieces, as well as other pieces that were known in her lifetime, are now being played by orchestras and instrumentalists and recitalists everywhere. She has fantastic violin concertos, fantastic symphonies. She really should take her place among the greats of American composers. And so we're going to perform a piece of hers that is one of the last things she wrote. Dances in the Cane Breaks she wrote in the year of her death, 1953, as a piano piece with 3 movements. And like so much of her music, it draws on her experiences. Well, so a lot of her music really draws on her strong spirituality and faith. It also draws on her roots as an African-American woman. And in this case, she wrote this piano suite, Dances in the Cane Breaks, to emulate what it would have been like for slaves in the South working in sugarcane fields, taking a break, sometimes in the hot heat, to take a break to dance, and what that might have looked like. And actually, you'll appreciate the title of the first movement, Nimble Feet. DJ has a strong connection, if you don't mind me saying that, to Muhammad Ali. Dog in some ways after his cornerman. Yeah. So anyway, Nimble Feet is the first movement. So what happened here was that William Grant Still, the one who wrote the Santa Fe, he took this piano piece and he created an orchestration of it. And he did it really wonderfully too. In fact, there's some nice touches by the alto saxophone in the orchestra that plays within the orchestra, and sometimes it's a pretty exposed moments. These pieces are wonderful. There's like a ragtime, there's a cakewalk, there's just a beautiful collection of dances. This is a little bit of Nimble Feet. It's a bit of a ragtime style. It's great to see you smiling. When you hear this music, it does make you smile.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
I mean, even though she lived a lot of her adult life in Chicago, she was from Arkansas, really.
There's a big connection between driving up the highway from New Orleans to Chicago.
Chicago, yeah.
That's how jazz got going.
That's how exactly. So the second movement of these 3 movements is called Tropical Noon. And it's, you can just imagine the heat at that time of day. Nice little tom-tom drums, maybe a little bit of a percussion. Lovely, right? The last movement has even the best title of them all, Silk Hat and Walking Cane. Yes, and the double entendre with the cane breaks and the walking cane. So, yeah, it's a fun one. The saxophones. Yeah. These are just lovely pieces, and it's so great to have these now as being part of the orchestral, canon of pieces that we can perform. And it's exciting. Her name was hardly known 10 years ago, and now like I said, her music is all over. If you ever listen to, for instance, like the Symphony Hall on Sirius XM, her music is played so much, and it's wonderful to hear because it's great.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we're glad those people didn't just throw all that stuff in the trash. Could you imagine? Like, I guess they must have. I don't even want to read about how that happened.
Yeah.
Where did they take it?
I think they took it first, like they did a little Google search on her, and then took it to her archives at the University of Alabama, I
There
think.
you go.
But then eventually, G. Shermer, the mercenary publicists on the East Coast, they got it all. So Shermer is publishing all of her
Do they
music.
give
And
money to her?
I hope. I don't think so. I don't know.
Hey, these things that have value.
Yeah, there is still a Florence Price, I think, elementary school in Chicago. Yeah.
There's a great estate for the Bernstein Foundation. Copeland has an amazing estate, and Charles Ives has an amazing estate. So just because they're passed away doesn't mean that money goes into very good things for music.
That's true.
That's good point.
Yeah. Well, then after intermission, we're going to have Copeland's Lincoln portrait, and not only in honor of President's Day, but this is one of Copeland's great pieces of music. I feel like it's not just about Lincoln. And there's a lot to this piece, actually. When it was written in 1942, obviously we were involved in World War II, and this was written in a time for a specific purpose, to give us a sense of patriotism and lift people's spirits during a difficult time of war. And it was actually the conductor, Andre Castellanos, who commissioned Copeland and several other composers to write pieces based on eminent Americans, whether political or literary, to write a piece of music to rally the troops. Something similar had been done, I think, just a year or two earlier when, I think it was the Cincinnati Symphony, and perhaps also Castellanos, they commissioned a bunch of eminent living American composers to write fanfares. And it was for that Copeland wrote Fanfare for the Common Man. So this was the second time around with the same orchestra and composer and conductor doing a commission that would help rally the troops and support them here at home to help lift everybody's spirits. Originally, Copeland was thinking he was going to write a piece based on Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman. Pardon me. And it was actually, I think it was the conductor who said, "Can you think about Lincoln? During these times, I think his words really, really true." And so Copeland took that as a challenge. So he said, put the Whitman project on hold, focused on Lincoln. He said that there were so many well-known speeches of Lincoln that there was so much to choose from. He actually didn't want to necessarily have just Lincoln's words and not just his most famous words. So he almost challenged himself to not use some of the more famous parts of like his second inaugural and other things like that. He says the one thing that he couldn't resist using was to end the piece with a quote from the Gettysburg Address. So he said that was just so perfect, he had to do it. But the other words that are quoted are from the Lincoln-Douglas debates and one, I think, his first inaugural address. So they're not as well-known passages. And the other thing that Copeland did was he permitted himself to let the narrator or speakers speak about Lincoln and say things like, born in Kentucky, raised in Illinois, all these things like that. He was 6'4", and this is what he said. And he was a gentleman. He was a gentle and melancholy man. But when he spoke of democracy, this is what he said. And so there are these little interjections of, in a way, Copeland was talking about Lincoln. So now, you may recall that we invited Mary Guthrie, our wonderful Mary Guthrie here from Cheyenne, to narrate this part. And unfortunately, she is not able to join us for health reasons. So we do have somebody else who has actually narrated it many times before and is coming up from Fort Collins to do it. He'll join the orchestra for the first time tonight. But unfortunately, we don't have Mary. Now, I want to talk about something else that fascinates me about this piece. Musically, there's a lot going on here. There's a slow introduction, and it starts very quiet and mysterious with a flute and trumpet and low strings. And Copeland himself said that he was trying to convey something of the mysterious sense of fatality surrounding Lincoln. That was interesting. In a way, we have a composer telling us this is like a fate motif. Like we have Tchaikovsky fate motif, Beethoven fate motifs. This is Copeland's, in a sense, like his fate motif, if you will. This is what it sounds like in Copeland. Somber and serious about it, as if we're entering into his musical world of something that we should be taking serious. The music builds, and it builds in an incredible way. I like to imagine once it gets to this real high point that it's almost like we see the towering figure of the marble statue of Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial in D.C. before us. When it gets to that high point, it's like we're right in front of it, bigger than life. Starts building up. There's like something imposing there. Well, this is going to change completely in a moment. And after this introduction, he wanted to paint a sort of musical depiction of Copeland's life and times at that time in the 1800s. And so it changes quite dramatically to something almost silly at times, where he quotes Camptown races, and I'll just play a little bit of what's coming. Actually, before that section, there's an important moment here. I show you. Okay, let me back up and just say, Copeland, one of the things that he does so well is, he utilizes songs that we know. And sometimes, whether it be The Gift to be Simple, or in this case, quotes of things like Camptown Races, he uses folk songs, right? But he uses them in 3 different ways. Usually in his pieces. Not every piece uses them in all 3 ways, but this piece does use them in 3 ways. So first, he just quotes folk songs, like the opening of the part of The Gift to be Simple in Appalachian Spring. And in this case, it's Camptown Races by Stephen Foster from 1850. And you'll hear that in a moment. The other way that he uses folk songs is that he takes a folk song and he changes it so much that it's almost unrecognizable, but he does it in a loving way. He sort of lovingly transforms it. And that's what he does here with a song called On Springfield Mountain. It basically is a wonderful little tune that goes, on Springfield Mountain, there did dwell a lovely lass I knew so well, oh well. And that's kind of the speed of it, right? Well, Copeland transforms that into something slow and tender and beautiful. And without the Springfield mountain aspect would not be lost in the connection with Lincoln and Springfield, Illinois. One second. So that Springfield mountain now appears in the clarinet in slow motion. Version of this simple tune. This is the music that we'll bring back later for those powerful words from the Gettysburg Address that are included in this. So, the other use, the third way that he uses folk songs is really something a little bit different. He writes his own original song that sounds like it should be a folk song, and it sounds familiar from the first time we ever hear it. Those are the three ways. So he actually quotes them, or he varies them, or he writes his own kind of folk song that's original. We have all three of those because in a minute you'll hear one in the oboe here. This is the introduction to the part where he's sort of painting life in the 1840s, 1850s. Here's the oboe tune. That we hear that over and over again. Sounds like it should be a folk song that we all know, right? Here it comes again. And here comes Countdown Races. There's a sort of fresh simplicity about the music. It's sort of trying to take us back to another time. Right? Eventually, this will be transformed to almost like a battle cry. And you can get a sense that, yes, Lincoln himself lived through simple times like this, but he also was involved in the war. And so it's almost like painting the story of a young adolescent man and the experiences that he went through and being called to war. Because it's very much of a kind of warlike element that comes in a moment. We can fast forward to battle cries. That quote on Springfield Mountain that we heard so delicately in the clarinet comes back in trombones and horns, and it becomes this beautiful canon over this incredible intensity. And all of this is before the narrator or speaker even stands up to speak. So there's an incredible musical tone going, if you will, before the words of Lincoln come in. And then when the words of Lincoln come in, it's so interesting. Copeland warned the narrator over and over again in the score, do not give overemphasis and don't over-dramatize these words. They're powerful in themselves. He said, well, we can never know how Lincoln actually said them, but we can all kind of sense of how he wouldn't have said them. And he didn't want people to give them an overly dramatic thing. And that's why sometimes it's better not to have an actor narrate this. Honestly, as wonderful as he is as James Earl Jones, who of course was the voice of Darth Vader and other things, his recording had no offense to James Earl Jones, but he's just too dramatic. He can't help himself by being he's an actor, right? And so sometimes it's better to not have an actor to do this. Many famous people have done the narration over the times, politicians, actors, others. And I think that it was wise what Copeland wrote in his score. We need to kind of follow that, to let the words speak for themselves. And there's also incredible musical accompaniment underneath the words, too. So one interesting little anecdote I did want to share was I only found out about this recently, and I've conducted this piece several times, or I think the first time I did it was in the mid-90s. So I've lived with this piece a long time, and I love it. But one thing I just learned, reading some program notes online, was that Copland himself conducted this several times. He wasn't, in later life he did a lot more of this conducting his own pieces. He conducted it in Venezuela during the sort of dictatorship regime of President Jimenez in the 1950s. And there was a famous actress from Venezuela who did the narration. And the dictator president hardly ever came out to public events, and nobody was allowed to say anything against him. And at the last minute, he showed up at this event. And when the words from the end of Gettysburg Address, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, who shall not perish from the earth, he left immediately. He got out of there, but it created a stirring among the audience of those Venezuelans, and it actually was the spark that started a revolution and ultimately had him deposed and out of power. So this piece of music changed the government.
America knows how to export some good, good freedom for others. Right?
That's right.
You don't have to do it with jets.
So, and there's if you Google about it, what I read was actually in Copland's own words, so I'm not conveying it as well as he did. I encourage you to check that out. But it is reminiscence of it. Yeah,
that's better than the Red Spring story. I've never heard that.
I know, isn't that amazing? Really, I mean, it's up there with the Sibelius-Finlandia story, because Finlandia, as we know, also helped to have the Finnish people find their own national identity and independence from Russia. Okay, so we've talked about all the other pieces. Now we're going to talk about Amadori's, Dougherty's, G's Ben.
I pronounce it differently every time. I think he says Doherty.
Does he say Dougherty?
Yeah, I'm getting it down. I've known him since 1999. But
well, that's such a cool thing. I was so I emailed the composer a few weeks ago, and he said, "Oh, give my best to DJ." And I thought it was just because you performed this piece, you'd written it basically for you and with you. But I didn't realize until I re-looked at your biography that you studied with him. Like he was one of your
yes,
teachers.
he was my main, probably my main mentor in composing.
That's amazing.
I was in grad school for 5 years, and then we've stayed in touch
That's
for the
so
whole
great.
time. He has also mentored me as an adult person, so he's been excellent. Yes. So,
Oh,
yeah.
give us a little background on DJ Sparks. So tell us a little bit about where you're from, how you got started in music.
Well, I'm from Maryland, and I always loved music from the very beginning. Would play on my grandmother's piano. There was a Days of Our Lives. Bong, 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 bong. So I did that very young. And then my great-grandmother, Violet Bond, would play hymns at her piano. And then she would have big box TV and a hee-haw. And I would hold her broom and pretend to play the guitar like Roy and Clark and Buck Owens, right? And then, so she gave me a toy Mickey Mouse guitar for my 3rd birthday, and then 4th birthday, a ukulele. And I guess my parents then found a guitar teacher for when I was 5 years old.
It's amazing.
And
Starting guitar at 5 is very interesting.
yeah, it was really cool. I was a great person. I'm still in touch with Brad Malinowski at Christie's Music in Westminster, Maryland. And Brad Malinowski was a college, now that I'm looking back, I can see, he was a college student who was going to Towson University. He played guitar in rock bands, but he was a psychologist. So he was a good person to work with kids. And he taught me a lot of country music and had me read music from the beginning. So
Yeah, a lot of guitarists, they've been playing guitar for years, they don't read it.
yeah, no, he put out the Mel Bay book for kids is what I went through. And for whatever it's worth, at age 5 or 6, I could play like a John Denver song and sing and play it along for people in the music store. Country Roads is the family song I played.
Oh, that's
For yeah. And then that led to, I'll just tell a story. That led to getting into the Beach Boys, and then by the time I was in 8th grade, I was into the rock and roll, like AC/DC and Van Halen and stuff. Then my mom was like, "Oh my God, this kid's getting terrible grades in all of his classes except for music and art." So she found Baltimore School for the Arts for me. That's where I went for high school. And there I was a jazz guitar major. When my teacher would have me play classical guitar pieces with guitar pick. The one for you now. And so that like now makes a lot of sense. So there's rock and roll, classical, like playing in front of people, and then I got into writing music. And so I went to summer camps for writing music for other instruments and stuff.
So when you were writing music, it wasn't necessarily just for the guitar. I mean, when you were just focused on guitar,
yeah,
you already had this urge to write for other instruments.
Yeah, I played. I was in a band in 5th grade, and we wrote our own song for a talent show. Called ourselves the Commanders of Rock. And then that band existed through 8th grade. We played 8th grade dance at North Carolina Middle School. And then when I went to Baltimore School of the Arts, we took a theory class. We were learning about 4-part writing. So I had got for Christmas when you had a little tape deck and you could do multi-tracks. Yeah. And I would write out the 4 parts of the guitar and then record them in. You can do this now with your cell phone, but back then you needed a machine. And then my guitar teacher was brothers with someone that taught at a music camp for the one I talked about today at a Walden School. And so he was like, you might be interested in this. And that's where I wrote a piece for violin, oboe, clarinet, cello. I wrote a piece for 8 violins. So I started writing other stuff like that.
And you've maintained a connection with the Walden School even up to now, right?
Yeah, I'm faculty.
Well, that is.
Well, I'm an adult now. I'm on their leadership committee. Yeah, so I have to do meetings. But yeah, I teach at the program they do for age. They got Ys and they now do ages 18, and we have some people come that are 80. 83 years old is the oldest participant. So you don't have to be like a college kid. Like there's a woman from Vermont that plays mandolin and she writes pieces for chorus and she drives over and she's.
So is it just for composers?
Nope. It's for, you could be a choral conductor, you could be someone who just plays guitar. This 18 to 80, well, you could be 105, I don't know, whatever you are. Come on down. And we like that it's not just like go-getter kids going to Ivy League schools.
Yeah. Now, it's called the Walden School, but it's not in like the Boston Walden area, like Walden Pond. It's in New Hampshire or something?
It's named after the poem, but it is in New Hampshire.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. So then, you were graduating from the Baltimore School of the Arts. What did you decide to do after?
I knew I wanted to go for composing from being a junior in college. I fought with my mother about where to go.
High school?
Oh, high school, yeah. So I worked really hard, and I knew what you needed to do to get in, and I put it together. I had a piece for 8 violins that was 15 minutes long. I had a children's chorus piece that was 15 minutes long, and I had a brass choir piece that was 2 minutes. That was 10 minutes long, and I sent those off to 4 places: Juilliard, Eastman, Manhattan School of Music, and Boston University. But I sabotaged. I didn't want to go to Boston University, so I sabotaged applications. They sent us write a 600-word essay about why you wanted to go, and I sent a 10-page paper on Bartók's Second Piano Concerto. I was like, I'll just turn in this piano concerto thing. But I got into 2 out of 4, so I ended up going to Eastman.
Wonderful.
Which was great. And cold, but well, you can cold in Eastman. But well, no, cloudy. There's no sun in Rochester. Don't tell the young kids. That's why you go work in the practice rooms. So that was a great training. I studied with people that had very big orchestral careers.
Yeah.
And Joseph Schwander has a companion piece to this Lincoln portrait called New Morning for the World, which is modeled after a Lincoln portrait, and it's based on Martin Luther King's work. It's an excellent piece, and so I've had a connection with that piece.
That's great. You studied with them, yeah. Did you find that you were, when you went to college, did you think, I'm going to find people like me? And then, were you also like, kind of like, how come I'm the only electric guitarist who's a composer?
Oh.
Like, how did that? Like,
yeah.
I like to think of you as a unicorn, like this like, unusual thing.
Well, things were changing, and it actually is interesting that Eastman School of Music started its classical guitar program the exact year that I applied to undergrad.
But
I knew because I was a planner. I took in 8th grade. I also got classical guitar lessons before I went to Baltimore School of the Arts, and we did play. I did learn a little bit of classical guitar at Baltimore School for the Arts, like with the fingernails and stuff. And so I sent an electric, I don't know what I was doing back then. I sent an electric guitar audition to Eastman. And then the teacher called up and said, hey, do you play anything on classical guitar? So I took out a tape deck and hit record and played through the Fernando source studies. I guess this isn't usual, one could do that, but I didn't know. I just sent it along, and then me and my buddy Dave were the first composers that were also classical guitarists at Eastman. And I think Dave took 5 years, and I took 4. So I'm the first one to graduate as a guitar minor from Eastman as a composer, like Verdi and Berlioz.
Oh, that's right.
Berlioz played guitar. You know, they're all bonkers.
I didn't know. Verdi?
Verdi, yeah, he had a guitar. He was a guitarist in his opera. You know?
Yeah, that's true. He does.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. Okay, so cool.
Yeah, but it was in Michigan that William Bolcom was a great cabaret pianist and classical pianist. Michael Dougherty does the best off-the-highway, holiday and lounge kind of style piano. He was in a soul band growing up. He has 7 brothers, all in this little house. The dad was a used car salesman. They're all in a band, a soul band. And then, so he's got it down, but he also studied with McGee. Yeah, so he's got it all combined in his head. And so it was Michael Dougherty that was really like, this is unique to you, this guitar thing. And there weren't people that played electric guitar doing what we would call avant-garde, modern music, and also play rock and stuff. So that, I guess that is kind of,
it is. It's special. When you told me the story about how Dougherty said you always have to take your guitar with you and keep playing guitar, it reminded me of the story of when the Argentinian composer Astor Piazzolla went to go study with Nadia Boulanger. And he was trying to not be known as a bandoneon tango player. But at one point, Boulanger said, play me that. And she said, that's the real Piazzolla. You can't lose that. So it's similar to what Dougherty said to you. Don't give up the guitar as part of your voice. It's even if you're writing operas and symphonies and other things.
Yeah, he was the one that taught me that these physical gestures you can do on guitar can be taken and then transferred onto other instruments. And he was like, even when you're composing, not even if it's not there. Then he told me to take it to my Rome Prize interview. That was maybe not. I didn't. Maybe I could. I didn't get it, so maybe I should. First second alternate.
Oh,
that's okay. So yeah, it was fun. And then
tell us a little.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, tell us a little bit about some of your other compositions now. I mentioned an opera.
Oh yeah, so the opera is called Approaching Ali, and that has a little life now. It's having 2 productions this year, which is in the modern world that's not 0, so that's good. And 0 is
it's an opera involving Muhammad Ali.
Ali is a character, and a young man meets him and is inspired by spending the evening with him. And then I have a few electric guitar concertos. My one that I'm most proud of is a song cycle for soprano electric guitar. Now, I imagine what would Debussy do if he had the sounds of an electric guitar? He doesn't have to always be aggressive, It can be, I don't remember how it goes. But I just do like arpeggios. And I was like, I'll just write you major chords. So, because don't let him,
You played, I want to thank DJ because he just spent an hour with me this morning at the Boys and Girls Club inspiring young kids, which was wonderful. You played a little bit of one of your original pieces of the guitar. Maybe you play some of the sample.
The Violet Bond piece, it starts like, I was imagining, what if Holst and Philip Glass went to something in a mountain in Tibet and wrote me a piece to play in honor of my great-grandmother. So it starts with like the strings are like dun, kind of like the beginning of the planets. Then over top of it I go, I don't remember. Then I have the winds echo, so it's that C clear. So it's a little bit minimalist, but I like melodic content more than a lot of the minimalists. Because I like Barbara and Cook.
Sure, Barbara.
And Dolly Parton too.
Tell us a little bit about your compositional process. I know I asked you this.
Crying all the time and then procrastinating and then crying for 2 weeks.
You just finished a piece literally yesterday morning at 4 a.m. for the American Composers Orchestra, which is a really big deal. It's going to be performed in just a couple weeks in New York. And recorded too.
Yeah.
Made a video and everything. So you've got a lot of stuff going on. But do you, and it's a simple question, do you write everything in the guitar? Do you use a piano? Tell us about that.
I use guitar sometimes. So I wrote this piece for Eighth Blackbird, and I was doing this thing on the guitar. I was like, it's fast. So that was like, oh, that sounds cool on the guitar. And then I like put that in for like clarinet and piano and violin and cello. And then, so I have a guitar here and a computer here, and then I turn to the right, and there's a synthesis piano keyboard. And then it's all a mishmash of like different, going around. And, And then one time I was on a treadmill and I had an idea. This sounds so, I guess it's true. I had an idea for a melody and I sung it in while I was at the gym, and I turned it into one piece. So you're just constantly collecting. And I learned this from Michael Dougherty, so we can tie it into him. He's always recharging his batteries. So if you're visiting with Michael Dougherty and you're like driving past Anne Frank's house, which was on this trip for G's Bend, he's like, we have to stop in and visit, and like he might write a piece about that someday. Or if you're with Michael Dougherty, there's a great story that he came to LSU, where we live now, and he had the wind ensemble conductors drive like an hour and a half out into the swamps because he wanted to see this old house that was like underneath all these live oak trees, and it was like spooky at night, and he got out and walked out by himself, and one of the conductors was a person of color, and he was like, we gotta get out of here. We're real far out, imagining the things that happened in the past there.
Well, tell us a little bit about, let's transition, that's a perfect segue into what G's Bend, the concerto that we're playing for you tonight. What was the inspiration of this piece, and why is it called G's Bend?
Yeah. So I think Dougherty, when he gets commissioned from an orchestra, he tries to relate it to something that's, he has a Lincoln piece too, by the way. The G's Bend, there's a tradition there of women, African-American women of G's Bend making these amazing quilts. So amazing that they hang in art galleries now.
Yeah, G's Bend, Alabama.
And so this was the Alabama Symphony commissioned this piece. So he was inspired by these quilts, and he went down there, and he's 6'8", and I think he's always looking down at, he's literally just looking down at people, because not in a bad way, he just is. And I'm always like looking up, so I'm like, oh. So he just kind of walks around, and he'll say like, hey, Luis, tell me about this, and like, tell me about that, or like, listen to them sing while they were quilting, and that inspired the third movement. And he bought the blankets, and then he mailed me one. And the first movement is called House. Right? And that's based on like a model of, when you look at the quilt, it looks like you're looking at the housetops from the sky.
Yeah, so there are these rectangular, concentric kind of rectangles built on each other, and it's like a quilting pattern, the housetop pattern. That's the name of the first movement. Whether or not he's in a way he's doing that with some layering of the orchestra and the guitar.
He doesn't do it like an abstract modernist. It actually sounds like also using to listen to it's in the style, using the gestures of the great composers in the orchestra language.
But from the get-go in this concerto, even in this first movement, he allows the guitar soloist to improvise.
Yes.
It says improvise in E minor, or improvise a la,
and it says a la Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
So that's the chord progression. But then like I can hit a wall on a and like one point it says play for a minute, like Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
That's the easiest thing for me, but for a violinist, that would be the hardest.
But then there's some really tricky rhythms in that movement. There's, I'm thinking of the last movement where he's got the And it's interesting, and we're going to work on this tonight, it's interesting to sync the guitar with the orchestra, because the guitar has a quick attack. And the speakers are in the front, and if you're imagine what it sounds like to play a tuba note in the back, like wah, and then their sound is going up into the rafters, and I'm like up front, pop. Right. So it's actually one of the things we'll work on is like getting everything tight. Yeah. And then that I'm projecting because I need sometimes not. I like to cook. Yeah.
I like to cook ahead. So I got a metronome. I'm working.
That happens all the time. People are used to, like a violinist, or if they're used to having a piano accompany them, and then suddenly they have an orchestra accompany them, they're not used to the fact that it takes an orchestra a split second longer than boom.
The part that I did, just a minute. I'll play it right tomorrow. doubles as a crotale.
Yeah.
Like, oh, get back there. Yeah, it's kind of fun.
One of these percussion bells that
Croton.
brings it. Yeah.
Fingers.
It's a really cool piece in so many ways. So they have 4 movements. None of them are too long. There's housetop.
1 minute piece.
Yeah, right. The second movement, right, Grandmother's Dreams. Grandmother's Dreams. It's really haunting and mysterious. You referred to it earlier when we were talking about Santa Barbara, I think. I don't know, was the story?
Yeah, I think that what we're looking at with William Grant Still is like and I always think of kind of Gershwin chords, which is similar kind of inspiration. And that one I love because my grandmother made quilts that I still have, and so I'm like, it's easy to get into the other the invisible presence of others can come into play. So that's really nice, and it also has improvisation for me, more of a blues,
Definitely.
pretty blues kind of thing, which is great for guitar players. you know,
Yeah.
so.
Could you play a little bit of the written down for us?
Yeah.
Just so we get a feel for that.
Well, then when I'm on stage, I have a volume pedal, so I can actually swell. But I do that with my foot. And the strings like. Then they bow the crotales, they can. And the strings. Yeah, so it's very pretty.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the bowed percussion. So there's a vibraphone, which is like a metallic. They use a bass bow to ring it. Instead of playing with the mallet, they use a bass bow like this, and it goes.
Yeah, it's okay.
And then they also do that on a suspended cymbal. And then at the same time, there's also this bell, really wonderful ringing bell called a crotale, which is tuned specifically.
Yeah. Whenever I hear the suspended cymbal bow, that makes me think it was hot down there.
Yeah.
Like hot in the house.
It definitely has that feel in this
So,
movement. Yeah. Then the third movement is like a woodwind and guitar feature, mostly a woodwind feature, really.
Yeah, I'm really an accompanist in that, and that reminded me of the Price piece with it's really the quilting bee when the women would sing while they quilt, and so Dougherty's imagining that the woodwind ensemble is the singing women. I just
And then the English horn goes.
and there's the washboard player.
Yeah, the washboard player comes up to
They
the
come up to the
front.
front, and then Dougherty's joke is what kind of washboard technique you use, the French technique or the German? Different ways of going straight into it. So I'll that for him.
That is funny. That's
Yeah.
big. Bass players, that's the big thing. To use the French style of bow,
Yeah.
the German style of
Yeah.
bow, bass. So that's just like
So that's you got to hand it up. So we'll hand it up.
yeah. So there's a washboard in this one.
Join along in the fourth movement.
Yeah.
You want to
Even ask the musicians to stand up for these solos, which
Yeah.
is cool in the score. Yeah. And the woodwinds of the Cheyenne Symphony are up to the challenge.
There's a very hard lick in the contrabassoon because they're like this, right? And it goes. It does big fist, which is easy on guitar.
Yeah.
But if you go, so they're like
Yeah. And then after that movement, which is sort of like each little section of the woodwinds gets a like 16-bar blues, like improvised solo, but it's written out. So you have the English horn, then you have bass clarinet and bassoons, then you have like oboes and English horn, and then you have flutes, and all that kind of goes by quick. And then we get to chicken picking, the last one.
Yeah,
Chicken picking.
that's well, you've heard the. If you do it, the really great people do it super fast, which I don't. So it's that kind of thing, but Dougherty's yeah. That's like that. Yeah.
And then accompanying that, we also get to bring in 2 different spirituals that are played in a kind of off meter from the normal. In a way, what we have is like Copland's quoting of a familiar song in a different way. So we get that, we swing low, we share it, and nobody knows the trouble I see.
Yeah.
It's very clearly here. You can hear them. It's just that it's not exactly the kind of like rhythm and meter that you would expect. It's off, which is cool.
But will they stand?
No, I don't think so. But
He had the trombone stand.
oh, the horn stand.
Or the
Yeah.
I mean, it's not looking into it, but
Yeah.
But
the horns were standing in practice, but I don't know if the trombones would do that.
it's up to you. I don't know. It's, I'm just here to play.
It does make a difference. And so, yeah, this one is kind of virtuosic. What you say?
Yeah, this one's good. It has like a lot of that. Another one. That's a little bit. It's not too hard, but I've worked on it. I think I played this in 2009 the first time.
Yeah.
10 years. Yeah, and then but I get to do solos that sound virtuosic. So like when I was in high school, I used to do. I've been playing that way since high school, so I got. That's like really easy for me. But all these
Sounds impressive.
Yeah. Well, that's the trick. So I didn't do it right. But if you make a facial expression, it changes.
So there's a recording of you and
Dayton Philharmonic.
the Dayton Philharmonic, and that was with Doherty's kind of supervision.
Yeah, he was there. I think that's made of 3 live concerts, 3 nights and edited together.
Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah.
And speaking of recordings, wanted to mention that the recording of another electric guitar concerto was part of a Grammy Award-winning album. Tell us about that.
Yes. The Grammy people are very specific about who wins these things. So the actual sentence is, I was an electric guitar soloist on an album that won the Grammy for Best Classical Compendium. But the winner was Joanne Falletta and Tim Handley. Even the composer himself.
Wow.
So you can say it. It's just, who gets the trophy? They're very stodgy. You're supposed to play on 50% of it to get the thing. I was like, well, I played concerto and I'm on the title cover. But that was a great life. That was really neat because we all have these ideas about what we'll do. And, so when Kenneth Fuchs, he's the composer, Kenneth Fuchs, he called me and said, "Would you like to play my concerto? We're going to make a recording of it with Joanne Falletta and the London Symphony, and we're going to record it at Abbey Road Studio." And I said, "Yes, I would like to do that." And then I got to play it with a small orchestra in Florida, which I think has one of the second best name after Cheyenne Symphony, but it's the Space Coast Symphony. It's in Cape Canaveral, Cocoa Beach, which is where I Dream of Genius. So I played with them, and I got it under my fingers, and then we went and I flew to London, and my friend lives in London, so I stayed with him, my good buddy, who's a lawyer there now. And then I walked with my guitar to Abbey Road Studio at 8 in the morning, and we recorded this thing in 4 hours.
Wow, amazing.
That's amazing.
And then they made it sound really good. London Symphony is very good. The people in London are known as being the best sight readers in the world, like maybe in the world. Like they just look at it and they just do it. And then Joanne Falletta is great, and the piece is very good. So that piece is like if Sibelius and Copeland got together. It has lots of wide open space, and it was originally premiered with the Bosemont, Montana Symphony. Bosemont, yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's called Glacier in honor of the national park.
Yes, it's it goes through different, like one of the movements called Droplets, and the one's called Vapor. Oh, and then the last one's Going to the Sun, which is like a beautiful one because it's yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I know this is only like your second time in Wyoming, is that right?
Yeah, I was in Jackson Hole January, playing with Jackson Hole Chamber Music, which is some people that put together a really cool chamber music. And that was their first winter season, and they went to play at the community center. The first one, they have a very fancy ranch.
Yes.
They normally invite fancy people to the fancy ranch, but they were like, "Oh, we're going to go into town. Better bring an electric guitar." So that's what they called me. And there were actually some metalheads that came to that concert and stuff. Some all kinds of big, nice mix of people at the community concert hall.
Well, we're glad you're in Cheyenne. This is your first time in this city.
I'll come back to Wyoming anytime. It's awesome.
It is
Yes.
awesome. Well, thank you, GJ. I'm so
Thanks,
excited that you're here.
thanks for coming to this.
I know we're already out of time. If there are one or two questions for DJ, that would be great. Don't feel like there has to be. I know I've already gone over your time. All right. Well, then let me pass the mic to Elizabeth from the library. She'll tell you a few